Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Well, what a year 2018 was. I think as I was riding the plane over here, I saw some figures that I think essentially crystallized in an objective way what all of us felt last year, and I'll just cite a couple of them. Last year, $43 billion was raised for VC/PE funds targeting China life science investments. And the average fund size increased to roughly $750 million. In terms of deployment of capital, close to $20 billion were invested in China life science companies. So there's obviously a lot of dry powder on the sidelines. That was up 36% from the year before. And in two other new avenues, we're seeing value creation through M&A, roughly $34 billion in value, and I think the most important dynamic last year was what we saw with the Hong Kong exchange. So, China is certainly where we were in the NASDAQ, in the early 90s. I think we're seeing really the beginnings of a really healthy and exciting ecosystem develop. So, I think what we're going to try to do here in the next 45 minutes or so is, for those people that are entrepreneurs with the blue badges, it's not really an issue of where we've been, where we're going. And for us with red badges as investors, what we need to do is really contemplate the risks. So for us, the way that I see it in the framework that we'll discuss, we have three wonderful experts with three very synergistic disciplines here where we'll learn a lot. Are really seven things. One is the environment that we're currently investing in. I think the most important thing is certainly the China-US relations. The second is capital, the access to capital, the flow of that capital. Assets, the quality of the assets, how those companies are being formed, de novo as opposed to in-license. Talent, which I think certainly as a VC we've seen as a bottleneck in terms of as we're building and investing in these companies, the talent pool to recruit from. IP, valuation, and then as investors, the exit. So why don't we do this? Why don't we start with U.S.-China relations, and certainly I think no conversation begins without CFIUS, but maybe, Nissim, if you want to start, brief introduction, your views, and we'll just go.
Okay. So my name is Nissim Darwish. I'm part of OrbiMed. As you know, OrbiMed, we're a global fund. We have several offices, which include China and Shanghai and Mumbai. I'm actually managing the Israel part of OrbiMed, and in the last few years, so a lot of Chinese delegation coming to Israel, actually looking for technology, especially on the medical device side rather than on biopharmaceutical. Even though late last year there was several deals that been done between Israeli, US, and China companies. So I think what I would say there is a demand for innovation from Chinese investor. I think what we do see more and more is the Chinese investor not only more looking for Me Too kind of product, they really want to see the cutting edge technology coming to China. So I think they are hunting for ideas and technologies that actually they can transfer into China. So we do see more kind of the in-license model where they see a technology that is pretty mature technology. This is another phenomenon that we see. I think they are not at the point that they really would like to do seed or A round. What we see them is more kind of more mature technology that have proof of concept that they are willing to take it into China. And the models usually that we have seen is actually building a joint venture with a Chinese investor or with Chinese VC that will finance actually the activity in China. So I think the high demand for cutting edge technology is really there. In Israel, most of what we see is the medical side, but we try to see, and we see more and more also on the biopharmaceutical side.
Hi, Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. My name is Linda G. I am a partner with McDermott, Will and Emery. Our firm is a leading global law firm for life science industries with 20 offices worldwide. We have extensive cross-border expertise to assist our client in very complex issues, especially in the current environment. And I think we cannot, we have to comment on CFIUS, which has been on the spotlight for the recent months. So let me just have a quick show of hands who haven't heard about CFIUS. Raise your hand. Thank you. So CFIUS is the short name for Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. It's the interagency committee in the U.S. regulating or approving, reviewing investments by foreign entities, meaning non-U.S. entities into U.S. companies. Used to be, CFIUS only reviews continuing investment. So a typical one would be if a foreign company, whether it's a Chinese company, it's a French company, or an Israeli company or Japanese company, if they are buying 50% of equity of a U.S. company, and such in the area that will touch upon U.S. national security, then such transaction will need to be reviewed by CFIUS and will have to be approved by CFIUS. The jurisdiction of CFIUS has been enlarged in August 2018 when a new legislation in the U.S. called FIRMA has expanded CFIUS jurisdiction to review not only continuing investment, but also non-continuing investment. And also, to many people's surprise, it touches upon biotechnology area, which many people have not associated biotechnology to be, with U.S. national security concerns. But anyway, long story short, so right now, as of now, CFIUS has the right, has authority to review investment by any foreign entity into a U.S. company that both controlling and non-controlling. So here, non-controlling means that if it's only a 10% equity that the foreign investor will be obtaining in a U.S. company, it might be also subject to CFIUS review. There are some criteria that needs to be met in order to determine whether such a transaction has to file a declaration with CFIUS. And also, I have wrote an article called CFIUS Broadens Coverage of Cross-Border Biotech Transactions. So a copy of this is outside. So any of you are interested can go grab a copy. So this article provides an overview of different types of transactions in the biotech industry that are subject to CFIUS review. And I can comment on more, but I'm going to let Cynthia to comment further before I go into more details on CFIUS. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. No, it's red. All right. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the organizer to invite me here, and thank you for everybody who's stayed here at like 4:30 already. So my name is Cynthia Kai with Northern Light Venture Capital, and I like to approach this question maybe a little bit differently. I like to say is really from the long-term perspective, because we are the VC, we're early stage VC, even though there are some short-term uncertainties and issues, but we still see from the long term, both in China as well as the US, the investment on the healthcare is definitely a way to go, the area to go. That's primarily is from the socio-economic perspective. Is the global is generally aging, and also the world is generally economic developing, and then so people cares about the healthcare will continue. Especially recently, I think we're lucky in a period of time. The innovation and technology breakthrough is just really incredible. So from the long-term perspective, is I still see this is a very positive trend will continue, especially China has been very positive. I think you mentioned about some of the numbers are really impressive, and I definitely see that will continue. However, there are a couple of issues. So one is the CFIUS we talk about, which is more of the regulation from the US side. And then there are also some Chinese government regulation, which is impact our short-term situation. So one is from the fundraising perspective, many of the VCs are seeing some of the reduction. And also, everybody knows a lot of the Chinese money, the RMB may not be able to transfer to the US, which right now is obviously the Chinese VC are very much involved and participating in the global market. So really, I think there are some short-term both from China as well as the US impact. But first of all, Northern Light is have a US fund, and so have less impact by those change. But also, we still consider overall for the long term, this is a great direction. And healthcare in general is a great direction, and China is absolutely a great direction. And also from the long term, I see is the US-China collaboration will only be able to do more, not less. And especially we're talking about healthcare, it's saving people's life. I think it's political, whatever it is. I just don't feel it's going to be long.
So your view is that the dynamic we're seeing, one needs to take a long-term view, and that there's good visibility on that path, and this is some near-term volatility that one needs to navigate through?
Absolutely. Yeah, so once again, we are, Northern Light is focused on the long term. We do more on the Series A or the seed, early stage. So, and consider some of the short-term issue is there, but to continue communicating with the entrepreneurs, with the KOL, which I'm doing, and that's where I am located in the US. And really the goal is to connect with the network and also really have a good understanding of the trend on technology. From that perspective, it really doesn't matter what's the short term.
Linda, how afraid are your clients right now? So clients that are negotiating in deals at the term sheet stage that have U.S.-China partnerships, what's their fear, what are their concerns, and how will you it?
So I think I agree with Lindy, and the activity that we have seen that our clients have been doing are still very active. So despite CFIUS has been in the spotlight, it doesn't really slow down the evaluations that the VC funds or the strategic investors, Chinese pharmaceutical biotech companies, are actually pursuing. So we have continued to see the investors actively looking at different type of US companies, different types of technologies. So I do want to mention that CFIUS has been created some uncertainty, because for certain transactions, if the transactions are going to meet certain criteria, now the parties to the transaction has to file a mandatory declaration with CFIUS. So clearly it increased some transactional cost and also a timeline, because you need to get approval before the transaction can be closed, before the investment can be closed. However, many of our clients are also, understand this reality, but this should not be a deterrence of reviewing or evaluating the good opportunities. Because the reason actually there is a misconception I do want to clarify, is some Chinese investors or some Chinese companies have interpreted the new CFIUS regulation to equivalent of a prohibition, which is not true at all, which is not right. It's a wrong interpretation. It does mean that certain transactions has now to go through the CFIUS filing, but it's not a prohibition. The investments into the U.S. biotech areas are still very welcomed. And also there are certain transactions, if we structure it right, are not subject to CFIUS transaction. So when coming to negotiating the new terms sheet or the new investment terms, we help our clients to keep in mind what's important, what's not important, and then to structure the transaction in a way that not subject to CFIUS transaction to the extent possible. But in some transactions, if certain rights, for example, board seat, are so critical to the investors, that's fine too. And we're just going to guide the clients how to go through the CFIUS filing process. So either way, it's not sort of the end of the day. It's not a prohibition. It's really just, yes, it's another step to go through, but it can be done.
Maybe I can add one point about the RMB fund versus the dollar fund. So I think that's very important, when a company in our portfolio start negotiation, I think the first thing that they was, whether it's an RMB fund or US fund or a dollar fund, because that's had a lot of implication about the negotiation, the chances that actually you will close the deal. I think that's very, very crucial, And I don't know what the trend right now in China, or the ability actually to establish more dollar-based fund rather than RMB fund. I mean, is that something that you see more and more of your Chinese are trying to establish US dollar funds?
Yeah, I think that's, everybody always want that because that's giving people the flexibility, and also the entrepreneurs prefer that. So they, later on when they do the exit, they have the opportunity either in the US or in China. However, RMB is still not a free trade kind of currency. So I guess it's not because people want it, it's because people are able to do it. Yeah.
So there's this nascent view out there that as the concerns, real or not, as they sort of percolate out there, that China will look to other avenues for innovation, those being Europe, area of the world, the Middle East, Korea, Japan. Are you seeing any of that dynamic?
Yeah, we do see this dynamic actually both with Israel and in Europe. I mean, we see more and more investors, that used to look mostly on the US, are actually turning and looking for either Israeli innovation, and this is why we see a lot of delegation actually coming and looking for innovation, both in Israel but also in Europe. I think in Europe we see a lot of activity right now, I would say in France and in Germany. These are the hotspot for biotech. Also in UK, not less in UK because there's enough money there, but I think we'll see more and more activity in France and in Germany.
Yeah, just a couple points. Yeah, I think that I see the trend as well. However, once again, I am from the Northern Light perspective. We kind of really serious about the investment as the overall long-term strategy, and we like to see we are able to really support entrepreneurs after we have investment. And at this point, our presence is primarily in the US and China, and we're not going out there, kind of other place. But I did see other companies are trying to do that.
I want to move over to the topic of assets. So the assets that these VCs invest in, both quality, the type, and sort of the scarcity of high quality ones. So maybe, if you want to start, what are you seeing in terms of the types of assets that are most provocative to you? Historically, we've seen mostly B2 be better. Now you're implying that we're seeing more innovative, more de novo. The companies that you're investing in, are they mostly in licensed products, or they de novo within China now? I mean, what's sort of the color of the assets?
So, we have we have to look at the biotech and pharma versus medical devices. So I think in medical devices, what we do see a lot of interest in cardiovascular, percutaneous valve implantation, stenting. I mean, this is what we see, kind of very interesting for the Chinese market. This is what the Chinese investors are looking. I think another area in medical devices is robotics. The numbers of physicians that have trained in China is, I would say, there is a new generation that need to be trained, and if they can use robotics to perform surgery, they really would like to see it. So we see a lot of demand to look into robotic and specific in surgeries. On the pharmaceutical biotech, these are kind of highlighted by me. There are some other areas I think that they are very interested. Another area that they are very interested is diagnostic. The point of care diagnostic, because there is not in every area in China or in Asia you can actually be accessible to a physician. So everything that can be done, point of care, this is very important for them. On the biotech and pharmaceutical side, I would say, mostly cancer. This is really the focus, cancer and diabetes. I would less see interested for them to invest in the rare diseases. I think we are not there yet, where if you compare what's going on and in US and in Israel, we're very interested in orphan indication. I don't see the same enthusiastic when we talk to Chinese investors to go into orphan indication at that stage. So I think that's the answer that I see are competing, are interested for the Chinese investor. But I mean, we have more experts here, but this is what I'm saying when I'm talking to my colleagues. I mean, this is what they ask us to look at.
So just as a quick follow-up to that, stents, valves, robotics are relatively mature markets in the US. So it's an arbitrage of geography and market opportunity. That's where the majority of the investments.
Sometimes it's arbitrage, but sometimes look, in mitral valve, there is no approved mitral valve in the US as well. So we do see interested in mitral valve, percutaneous mitral valve implantation, also from the Chinese. So some of them is closing the arbitrage, some of them is actually really on the same level as US and other places in the world.
Linda, the term sheets that you see come across your table, do we tangible data points on this?
Well, the term sheets that I have seen from our clients really range widely from different types of technologies, from oncology candidates to immunotherapy to medical device, you name it. It's really a wide range of different types of biotech technologies. So it's really all over the place, meaning it's very active.
Cynthia, what do you say?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is definitely maturing. The whole VC world is maturing. In the past, I think the Chinese investor tend to cluster into like PD-1, PD-1, right? And which I've heard some of study like they were overthinking of diabetes. Yeah. So we are trying to avoiding those kind of things from the asset perspective, and it's really looking for a different approach or different kind of problem target or really a truly revolutionized, which we do see that, especially I am focusing in the US, is once a while. I'm so excited to see the technology is very much a breakthrough.
So given that Northern Lights focuses on the early stage, one of the viewpoints is that the U.S. has the ability to go from 0 to 1, the innovation, and China has the ability to take that 1 to 100, right? I mean, it's the demographic, it's the speed of regulatory approval. What is the innovative environment like in China, i.e. the tech transfer offices, universities, sort of de novo research and innovative product development? Where are we in that stage?
Yeah, that's a very good question and interesting one. First of all, I think is especially right now in the biotech or the biopharma area, a lot of the entrepreneurs actually are returnees. So what we have seen is much higher quality of from the scientific perspective, and also really have a good understanding of the global market, and also being Chinese, they actually have an advantage of knowing the Chinese market. So from that perspective, is I won't say is kind of who is more innovative. I think is mainly because we have been doing a lot of the returnees. And that's actually also why, from a Model Line perspective, we are starting the operation in the US. It's really want to get in early stage myself and kind of connecting with the potential entrepreneurs as China.
So if we think about the process here to investments, we talked about the environment, we've talked about capital, we've talked about the assets, and so now the next step is building out that team and building that company. So, one of the bottlenecks that we see is really talent. So maybe, if you could start just the investments that you see in terms of not only the ability to hire, but just the quality. I mean, there's an arbitrage of innovation at the moment between the US and China, but is there an arbitrage right now in terms of talent? And then can they look outside of China for that talent? What do you see on talent?
So what I can say, with some of our portfolio company that we have some deal with Chinese and we get them the right access to China, we are moving part of the team to establish a site in China and actually to teach the Chinese and actually transfer the technology in a way. So this is what we see. This is how we sometimes arbitrage, the talent or the knowledge that are being built and in Israel or in the US. So this is what we are doing actually to accelerate.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? So you have silos of experts and teams that you then place into China to help.
Initially, to establish the Chinese JV together with the company. So this is how we build, this is how we transfer the technology into China. Or sometimes they will come over and spend some time on the lab of our portfolio company to learn the process, to go into the manufacturing process. So this is how we are doing it. I want also to comment on one other point, which is important. I think, initially, a few years ago, if you think about Chinese really interested in domestic market, what we see more and more is not only the domestic market. They want to become global, which is important. So this is also why we see them doing some acquisition of technology, that sometimes even not available in the US. So one of our portfolio company, in Israel actually devoted, protection of emboli during cardiovascular procedure, and we asked them, do you really want it for the Chinese market? The answer, no, we really build it globally. We want to become a global player. So this is another thing that you see really changing within the Chinese investment or company that really want to become global. I don't know if you saw it as well. But
yeah, absolutely. So that's actually one of the criteria Northern Light have right now is people is the most important criteria for when we invest, especially for the early stage. You really don't have a lot of others, but the people are the most important. And as you have said, is one of the areas really critical for us is do you have the global vision, not just China, and this is very critical. And back to your early question about the talent pool, is there a lag or gap in there? I definitely see there are gaps, but it is the talent in China is getting better and better. I think is primarily coming from two areas. One is the returnees, and I think there are many reasons. One is U.S., especially the big company, which a lot of the Chinese, when they graduate from the top school, they want to go to the top company. And many of them is probably downsizing. So, and they have a lot of knowledge and capability. And right now with a great investment kind of environment in China, many of them going back. So from that perspective, definitely see the quality is going up. And also the multinational company in China also have developed quite a bit of talent in there. So I do see this is getting better, but it is definitely not enough, especially with the speed we are going. And one more point I want to say is also the quality of the entrepreneur in China in the healthcare we see is very different than the one such as in the US. And we normally say that in the US is probably more specific kind of the talent, either their management or the scientist, and more specialized and looking for probably differentiation. However, in China, you pretty much have to be all-rounded, and I call it you have to be a decathlon sportsman or heptathlon, which I am used to be. So means you have to know everything, and from the science, management, people, government relationship, and so forth. So a little bit different, I think, compared to in the U.S.
One other comment which I think is important, about talent and building a company in China is actually the turnaround of people, employees, which is a big issue, especially when you're talking about manufacturing, a very precise process of manufacturing of medical devices. The turnover of employees is an issue, and we have to face it, because, there is a lot of opportunity right now in China. So you train your employee, and the next day they are going away. I mean, that's an issue that I think we are facing. Some of our companies are facing right now in China as well.
As you negotiate these employment contracts, how competitive is it, the pool out there in terms of compensation? What's the compensation structure like now?
To answer that question, actually, let me provide some additional comments onto the talents, and then we will talk about the compensation arrangement. So what I have seen that some of our clients have been doing is very different from just the returnees, meaning the U.S. trained scientists going back to China, set up companies in China. So we actually, some of our clients are coming here to the U.S. So I just helped Chinese biotech companies set up R&D center here. So basically, they're not just luring or trying to encourage the scientists to return from the U.S. back to China. They're actually coming here seeking talents. So there are quite a few examples. Some of the Chinese investors are providing the seed money, and then they're setting up this new entity, and then the employees, basically the scientists, they are coming from the U.S. pharmaceutical companies, and some of them have advisory board members from top universities, and actually they use the U.S. newly set up company to license the technology directly from Harvard, Technology Transfer Office, MIT Technology Transfer Office, to really just to really just build the talent, build the innovation here from very beginning. And in terms of how, what's the incentive to keep the talent, to retain the talent, it depends on the corporate structure we have seen. For example, if some talents are returning from the US to China, and they're going to be located and working in China, the compensation arrangement and also the incentives would be different from the employees or the talent that are here still in the US. And then we oftentimes work with the client to design a corporate structure to address both, and oftentimes we help them set up a more global sort of multi-tiered structure so that the subsidiaries or the talents of the subsidiaries, they can participate in stock options of the parent company. So that's, I guess, that's more complicated, but it's doable. So in other words, that's the best way to incentivize the talents, to give them stock options, other type of incentives to really keep them going.
Why don't we shift over to IP? Rightly or wrongly, IP is a concern that pops up all the time. Mr. Why don't you start? How important is the IP process in your due diligence? how do you see the China landscape is impacting IP protection?
So, I have to be careful. So I think IP is very important, and I say, in all our company, I mean, it used to be, sometimes we didn't write some of, 20 years ago, company didn't write to register their IP in China. Nowadays, everybody is registering their IP in China. I mean, this is kind of known. I think, we still have concern about enforcing IP in China. I mean, I cannot say that we're 100%. And the way that we think about enforcing IP in China is actually find a Chinese partner who will do it better than you. I think we are, as a US or Israeli or European company, we don't have the ability to enforce it. The only way to enforce it is actually to find a good Chinese partner that will take care of the IP. Because otherwise, I'm not sure that we'll be able to protect it. I mean, this is my view.
There's a view in China that as China innovation grows, and China has to value its own IP. So we've certainly seen from the government promises of greater IP protection for Chinese companies. How important is IP, Cynthia, for your due diligence?
Very important, very important. And this is, once again, both looking at, in the US, really the global view, not just in China, and definitely also we are looking for technologies to really have the barrier. So a lot of that is, IP is certain law there, but there are also know-how, there are others. So we are looking for things really have the barrier. And in addition, just some people.
And Linda, it's from the legal perspective, the IP?
Yes, clearly IP is very important. And I want to share a story. So one of my clients invested in a company. The company has obtained a license from Harvard Technology Transfer Office. It turned out that when the patent was initially applied through PCT, China was not covered. So definitely it's such a big detriment if China is going to be a big market. So when it comes to this situation, different clients would take different approaches. Some clients would say, wait, the same technology has no protection in China, so I'm not going to concede it. And there were other clients who would also say, okay, wait, yes, China doesn't have protection, so it's not optimal, but if I'm going to invest into this US company, its growth potential in the US, in Europe, in other markets of the world are still has a bright future, would I still invest? And if they answer yes, they would continue to invest. So IP clearly is very important, but it's really depending on the specific analysis by different investors and of different companies. And I do want to mention one important thing. It's also sort of a new legal or updated legal regulation in the US. So last October time, US has passed laws to enhance its export control regulations. So if a biotechnology company and if the technology it develops, it researches, it manufactures, are falling into the so-called critical technology definition, then such US company will need to obtain US export control license for its technology before it can be licensed out to any company, to companies that are non-US companies. So just need to be aware of this new regulation, which actually has a big impact on licensing transactions and also on investment transactions.
I mean, we could talk about this stuff forever, any of these issues. But in the last 5 minutes, why don't we talk about the last piece of this puzzle, which is the exit. We're investors. We have our own constituencies that we need to answer to, and the most important one is return on that investment. So, can you talk about how you formulate, think about the exit strategy and potential return on the investment as you evaluate new opportunities? opportunities, and how now with the Hong Kong market, JVs, growing M&A, how are they making new verticals for potential exit in the Asian markets?
So I would say right now we're still focusing on the exit that we think will, the initial buyers will be US based. I mean, this is our initial thought. Even though, as I say, we do see more and more actually transactions done actually selling to Chinese companies. So we do see that this one of our hybrids for the company was sold to Chinese buyer. But we're still focusing on US kind of strategy of exits. I think the Hong Kong stock exchange is an interesting one, especially changing now that some of the medical guys don't need revenue. So I think that's another venue that we have to take into consideration. And it's becoming viable kind of exit strategy for Israeli and also US company. And I know US company as well as Israeli company are actually looking to go into the Hong Kong. Still, I think that the line in the Hong Kong stock exchange, and and we need to be prepared a year and a half before that. So 1 year and a half for a startup company is a lot of time. So we need to consider that. But I think yes, we still focus on U.S. and European exit kind of scenario. But in the back of the mind, the Chinese and the Hong Kong stock exchange is becoming more and more kind of alternative route for exits.
And what's the pipeline of clients looking to file for IPO?
I think among our clients, the first choice would still be NASDAQ, would be still the US. And clearly, with Hong Kong Stock Exchange has opened its door to pre-revenue
You do both?
companies. You could do both. But I think if there's a choice, the first choice would still be NASDAQ.
Why is that? Why NASDAQ over Hong Kong?
It's maybe it's a perception issue, could be, part of the factor, the prestige, and also I think overall, Hong Kong Stock Exchange being so new, just opened to IPOs for pre-revenue biotech companies. Some companies would, clearly it's a wonderful opportunity because it does provide one additional avenue to exit. Some companies are still taking a wait-and-see mode, and then NASDAQ being the very matured sort of listing market for biotech companies, is still the preferred way to go.
It's a good early stages, not really thinking about exit, but how do you think about exit?
Actually, we do, and because there's always a look for what is the next round there. And also, I think that's where the regulation uncertainty probably even more difficult to navigate sometimes than CFIUS there. And so we talk about NASDAQ, Hong Kong, and right now is Shanghai is coming up. And also, I think clearly because of this, I believe the data showing last year we had, the 2017, there was an IPO of 50 something, and last year was less than 20. So that's clearly with the government and also the process change that's have a major impact there. And also from the biotech perspective, I believe compared to like the TNT, which Northern Light also participate, the merger acquisition is much less active, and which I think is probably still in development, and just simply because of how long people have been investing.
Those are all great points. Just as a follow-up to your comment on U.S. companies as sort of the acquirer, I think an interesting view is also that if what we're seeing in China is a reflection of what we saw in the U.S. in the 90s, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There may come a point that these large Chinese-focused companies that are looking for innovation will have to do that via acquisitions, which is what we're seeing here in the U.S. as well. And Linda, it's interesting that you said NASDAQ, because I think that there is sort of a view, rightly or wrongly, that maybe the buyer in Hong Kong allows a greater valuation, right? So I think that there's sort of pros and cons here. We have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to put you all on the spot. One trend, one issue, one factor you think that as we reflect and look back on 19, a year from now, it sort of pops up. So maybe, Mr. if you want
I think we'll see more and more Chinese money going all over the world, not only to US. I think we'll see the Chinese more active in the biotech and medtech.
Yeah, I agree. I share the same optimistic view.
Pretty much the same. Is overall, I think Chinese both in the capital market as well as the technology market is really
to. So still very much a rosy picture.
We also.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully it was an informative, valuable. Thank you for